Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, alongside my co-host, Julio Vela. What's going on, man?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Very good. Sitting next to Trinidad Zamora.
That's right. We have some returning guests this week. Trinidad, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much for having me back, guys. Thank you.
We are also graced with the presence of one Paul Kennedy.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, thanks for joining us.
Back.
Yeah.
Been about a year.
Has it been that long?
Yes.
I think the reason we don't think it's that long is because your clips have gone viral.
Your clips live in infamy. They live on forever.
So as long as that's the only thing that's viral.
That's
That's good. That's good.
we're going to be with you for the next hour, ladies and gentlemen. We will be talking a very packed current events this week. You know, for 4th of July, there's been a lot of other fireworks this week. We will take your phone call starting at 8:30. 713-807-1794 is the number. We also have Twitter up at HCCLA_TV. Go ahead and send us your question and comments right there all night for Paul, Trinidad, Julio, and myself. But guys, let's jump right into it. Obviously, I think the biggest, well, there's obviously two big stories this week, but the biggest that nationally from what's been going on for the last year is this whole Hillary Clinton email investigation. And this week, of course, the FBI director, James Comey, comes out and says not enough evidence to indict based on the, the email server investigation in itself. Unusual move in the sense that you have the FBI director, who was also a former deputy attorney general in the Bush administration. He comes out kind of against protocol, makes this proclamation. I mean, as much as people, and it's amazing to me how many people all of a sudden have become experts in federal law and FBI investigations upon this thing.
What's the meme? Don't confuse your Google search with my lawyering.
Law degree, yeah, exactly. And look, I mean, setting politics aside, okay, let me just get it out there. I think both the Republican and the Democratic candidate are woefully underqualified to be president. But from a purely criminal standpoint, I do not have a problem with them saying, we don't believe we can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Because when you think about it, first off, if you look at the U.S. Attorney's Manual, they have a lot of discretion. And these are some of the things that they are supposed to look at when whether or not to bring a case. The odd thing here is you have the FBI really making the predetermination versus the Justice Department. But from a standpoint of we can't prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't have any qualms with that, because they probably looked at this and said, we're going to get a mostly liberal jury in Washington, D.C. The evidence is about whether or not she had intent. Can we prove careless? Yes. He clearly admitted that. But I don't know that we can prove the requisite intent that we have to beyond a reasonable doubt. And I applaud them for looking at that, okay? However, what I don't applaud them for is the fact that they don't do this in other cases. This is clearly a situation where she got the benefit on the doubt on a close call, and even got, some will argue whether or not she got more of a political witch hunt because the FBI director went out and did this, but at least she knows she's not getting charged criminally. A lot of our clients sit there and don't even know that nobody's coming after them.
So the system worked for her.
It did, not surprisingly.
It worked. I mean, it worked how it's supposed to work. Just government said, you know what? I don't think we can prove the case.
Yeah.
She's an upstanding citizen, and she's going to be just fine. We're not going to proceed.
I don't think they were willing to go.
Well, right. I mean, I was speaking in generals, but yeah. But why doesn't everybody else get that benefit of the doubt? Or why doesn't the system work for everybody else?
Well, I think a bigger question. How many of our clients do you think there's really a discussion going on with the police or with the DA's office? That's a close case. I mean, do you think we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? Or, that evidence is a little bit sketchy and contradictory. Maybe we shouldn't bring that one. Yet, when you've got a high-profile defendant, or a case up in Minnesota where you've got, not this one that happened the other day, but the last shooting up there, in which the DA says, well, we're not going to bring the charges because there's so much contradictory testimony going back and forth, we don't think we can prove it. I've never had a prosecutor sit there and tell me that we got some contradictory evidence, we're just going to go ahead and let this one go.
It's the same old story of, it's backwards. They're arresting first, and we'll sort it out in court later. When in reality, it should be a discussion between law enforcement and the prosecutors. And then, if they think that they can make the case, they should file. Absent the circumstances where some sort of crime is committed in the presence of an officer and they have the ability to arrest. But the cases where that should be evaluated, or even not even the close calls, it's the backwards way of thinking of, oh, intake will accept this charge and we'll just have to sort this out in court later. Because then what happens is the person has to get arrested, they have to bond out if they can afford it, and if they can't, then who knows if things like
a job, you're looking at your family, there's a pregnancy involved, then, again, then they start pleading. What you're going to is that it's a plea mill, and you're absolutely right. The benefit of the doubt is supposed to go to the runner. So, I mean, with Clinton, you know what, the system, like what Jay was saying, is it worked for her. But, I mean, we represent a number of individuals who don't have that benefit, that struggle from day to day. Just an allegation will ruin their entire life, their livelihoods and everything that's along with that. But it's tough. I mean, with looking at that and trying to look at it objectively through that lens, it worked. The system worked for them.
So what was the whole big business about the Bill Clinton meeting at an airport with the original person in charge of it?
There's all the conspiracy theories about Bill Clinton meeting with Loretta Lynch, the United States Attorney General, on the tarmac in Phoenix.
You don't think that was just a coincidence?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, from the stories that were told, he had his plane wait there knowing she was coming. So I don't think it was a coincidence. Look, everybody's going to have their conspiracy theory. It's a hotly contested political year. You've got, I've said it before, we are really divided right now as a country. You couldn't have a more divided race at this point. And this has been building. I mean, we've got the far left and the far right have basically taken over the parties in this country, and that's what we're up against. And you have in this situation with Clinton, and look, I talked to several FBI agents here who said, and those agents shall go remain nameless, but they had 125 agents working this case. Okay, they spent millions of dollars on this one case. You know how many agents there are in Houston on the counterterrorism section? There's 156 assigned to counterterrorism in Houston, okay? And they had 125 investigating Clinton and the email server, all right? So the amount of resources, the amount of agency that went into this, the amount of man hours that went into investigating this, and what every agent that I talked to here said was they believed that there was, what they were hearing, that there was enough for an indictment, but that they were going to figure out how to make this go away. That was what every agent told me, that they believed that there was enough to recommend an indictment, but they were going to figure out how to make this go away. And when you hear what Comey said, you're kind of thinking, if you've ever done a federal case, you're thinking, geez, I've had clients indicted for a lot less than this.
Yes.
And they figured out how to make it go away.
Well, I think part of it, I was listening on my way home from the office tonight to the NPR Politics web podcast, and they were talking about the whole Comey announcement. And one thing that they pointed out is, you've got this difference between, criminal intent and just carelessness.
Right, exactly.
Being careless is not against the law. And they talked about, you got to have criminal negligence. And what they pointed to as far as that misdemeanor went was General Petraeus, in which in that case, he admitted to handing over these classified materials to his girlfriend, and said why he did it. And that met the standard of criminal negligence, so they were able to file the misdemeanor. In this case, you don't have that. And so I don't think it rose to the level of a crime at all.
And then tonight, the State Department reopens their inquiry into this. So, where does it stop?
It doesn't.
Are they they're trying to get this answer, but how much more resources are going to be utilized. 120. I mean, God knows how many are going to be on this situation now. I mean, where do you go from there if they don't get the answer they want from them?
Well, they're going to have a congressional referral. I mean, it was made clear today that Congressman Chaffetz said expect a referral for her making false statements to us within a few hours. You can expect that.
I find that funny, that you can get in trouble for making false statements to Congress when there's not one person on that floor that doesn't make false statements on
All
a
the
daily
time.
basis.
Hilarious.
But here's the problem, Paul. Think about this, okay? He got up there and said, Comey got up there and said, there's only been one case prosecuted for this, all right, for what they were looking at. Now, if they make the referral and they have to go back in front of the public and make these same statements again and figure out whether or not it's appropriate to charge her with making a false statement to Congress, they had far less evidence against Roger Clemens, and they charged him. I mean, here's the problem that I have, is you have someone who clearly, whether it was careless, whether it was negligent, she mishandled government, highly classified government material, okay? And there's some problems there. And the biggest offense to me, and I see a bunch of criminal defense lawyers, who are out there supporting her, beating her drum, just, blindly. She stated she did that and set up that server to avoid the Freedom of Information Act request. Now, I don't understand how you can be a defender of liberty and support someone who wanted to hide government material from the public. Tell me that.
It's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, but again, the system worked for her. I mean, but
the system doesn't work for us. That's the problem.
It doesn't. I've seen a number of times where we have, a client who's, you need to accept this plea or we're going to go re-file this as a felony. I mean, so we're right back into the plea situation where people are struggling. And you're right. I mean.
I wonder, I get it, but man, I bet you she is being watched, and even at the highest level, she's nervous about the government looking at her stuff.
She's got to be. I mean,
that's some.
But she's probably not. I kind of feel like she's one of those, and God knows we've all had these clients who they just think, I'm above it.
No.
I'm above it. I mean, I've had clients like that who they just think, you know what? They're not going to get me. They don't have enough on me. They can't prove it on me. Whatever they say is not going to stick. And to some degree, I feel like she's that type of person. Trump's the same way. Yeah. I mean, believe me, he just thinks he can go out there and slander federal judges and everything else, and nobody's going to stick to him. That's the problem we've got. It's a no-win situation for us. But I mean, how can you, as a criminal defense lawyer who wants to protect people's liberty and you want the truth, how could you vote for someone who wants to hide the truth? How could you do that?
Because it's not Trump.
I mean, is that really the best argument?
I think the race has gotten to that point.
But
I agree. What's happening to this world? I know. When that is it, it's like you got two, and you either participate or don't participate. I hear the Libertarian candidates on all 50 ballots.
Gary Johnson.
50, yeah, whatever.
You got the Green Party. I had her name in mind, Dr. Jill Stein.
Yeah.
Who ran last time around. And let's face it, in Texas, it's going to go, it's a Republican-leaning state. I would be surprised if Texas didn't go for Trump. And so, you can cast your vote for Dr. Stein.
But what happens in Harris County? Because last time, Obama won by about 2% of the vote in Harris County. Now, it didn't affect certain local races.
Locals.
But how does this investigation affect what happens in November here locally? I mean, we've got a lot of big races coming up. We've got the DA's office, we've got the sheriff's office, and we'll talk about that a little later because those two are at each other's throat. Yeah. But, you got a bunch of judges up. This is kind of a big deal at this point.
I think maybe the Dems will squeak through on a few benches, but I think the Republicans got a pretty lock on the state court, I think, my feel on it. I hope because I think most of the local elections, at least for judgeship, the idea is that they're based on their own merits, not through the party line, but it turns out most of them are Republican, which
I think what's going to make the determination on those races is the vote. Is a voter turnout in the city of Houston going to be what it was the last two presidential elections? Because that's the reason that we had that near sweep on Obama's first run, and had went quite as much the next time around. And for whatever reason, Hillary goes out and gets people out to vote.
How'd you like Hillary holding that conference in front of the bankrupt casino? That scares me half to death, man.
Well, and okay, so here's the bad thing about it, and shows like ours need to educate people, because again, everybody thinks they, know what's going on. I see all this stuff on social media about, well, they need to release the recordings of her interview. They don't record those interviews. They never have. The FBI never records those interviews. They just don't do it. And people are shocked to hear that, but they don't. I mean, I've never had an interview with somebody that I'm representing, who was a cooperating witness, who sat down and had their entire, interview recorded. Usually it's just notes, and it's whatever the agent like. I mean, you know how you take notes. You hear what you want to hear, and you write it down. And that's typically...
Sounds like a police report.
Well, but that's, yeah. I mean, it is. And that's typically how federal investigators' notes are.
And if you were to hear the recordings, what would that do for you? I mean, if you heard it and you're not making you're not the shot caller, what does it really matter? I mean, to me, what does it really matter? I mean...
Yeah, but a case like this, guys, I mean, it's going to affect, I think, the way people perceive the system, because they're all going to, when people come in to see you, they're going to think, well, why isn't this happening for me? It happened for Hillary Clinton, and I'm not. I mean, you can be the cynic and say, well, she's Hillary Clinton.
Right.
You're not her, so you're not going to get that treatment. But at the same time, I see a lot of people who say, well, this is how it goes. In some cases, it is how a federal investigation goes, but in a lot of cases, it's not.
I mean, like in corrupt Russia, or like the depths of Venezuela, or like, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. The elites are walking, and the people...
But JV, that's not only there. I mean, that's here.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, so did the system work? It did. It worked for the people it's designed to work for. The system has never been designed to work for the poor. Never been designed to work for minorities, ever. And, this is a perfect example. And, just a little bit of a tangent, but, that whole, the Stanford swimmer case, when everyone was up in arms about the sentence. I mean, we all go before judges that say, look, we don't want to ruin this kid's life. He's not been in trouble before. Well, you got an Olympic, quality swimmer. That argument, they listen to it and they took that into account.
A little weight.
With somebody who's struggling to put food on the table for their family, it doesn't carry quite the same weight. And I thought that case kind of spelled out more, that in our, injustice system, some lives are more valuable than others.
Oh, that sucks. That's horrible. Is it though? Is that what it is?
I mean, with what's going on right now in Baton Rouge and Minnesota, I mean, it appears that life is, it is rather cheap. I mean, that's how it's being portrayed.
The darker the cheaper, or the poorer the cheaper?
Well, let's not forget that, in Louisiana, the Blue Lives Matter bill, making it a hate crime to kill a police officer.
It's a hate crime?
It can be considered a hate crime if you kill a police officer.
But here,
But
here's the thing. I mean, and this goes back to every time there's a high-profile result, whether it's Hillary Clinton not getting charged, whether it's Robert Durst being acquitted of murdering Galveston, whether it's O.J. Simpson being acquitted, 22 years ago. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen that 30 for 30 on that 5-part series, you need to go watch it.
And I actually finished reading
because
If I Did It.
I think it is very timely, given everything that's going on, because the series does not just focus on the trial, which that part is interesting in and of itself, but it starts out on the subject of race and chronicles everything that had happened in LA with the race wars, with how the police were treating minorities in LA. And it chronicles how that built from what happened in the 50s and 60s all the way to how that impacted the OJ result and impacted the verdict that happened in that case. And so I feel like every time there's a verdict like that or a result like that, it makes our job as criminal defense lawyers harder because we do an inadequate job explaining to people why that happened and why the system is different for them.
Well, because when you say it's bought, because you need resources, and they say, what do you mean? This should be justice. And you say, no.
It's just us.
It's just, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, there was an article today in the New York Times about a case that happened here in Houston, and it dealt with the field testing for.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
Great article with
Yes.
the little $2 kits.
That's right. That they still use and are basically considered enough evidence to convict people. Mm-hmm. The sad part in that case, okay, is the woman who it's a time-told story that happens down at our courthouse. You get an appointed lawyer who goes in, you're talking to him through a holdover cell, and they say, here's what the state's offering. I'll give you 45 days. Most you could face is 2 years. The person tries to explain their story about how this wasn't, I didn't have drugs. I didn't have this.
I'm innocent.
I'm innocent. And the lawyer, yeah, okay, well, I don't believe you. Here's your options.
Well, there's nothing that lawyer can do.
No, because you don't have the money to go out and prove
That's right.
that is a faulty test. Mm-hmm. And what that article said was that there was a bunch of different substances that would give a false positive in that field test.
Yeah. And I had no idea that there's something like 8 common substances that it can be found anywhere that can set it off. Light sets it off. Heat can give a false result. Coldness can give a false result. Cracking it wrong can yield a false result.
I had a case once down in Galveston in which the police said they found a beige in color rock on the back seat of my client's car. And I told him, we're not doing anything right now. We're going to wait until we get a lab report back. And when the lab report came back, sure enough, even though the field test said it was crack, no, it was a beige in color rock.
Yeah, you mean it was just a rock?
It was just a rock.
Oh, shoot. Okay, so then let me get this straight. They had to pay you a whole bunch of money because you are Paul Kennedy. Then he had to bond out, or she had to bond out, and they had to experience getting arrested and going to jail. And the trauma in their mind that, yeah, they could give me a vaginal cavity search.
Well, I don't think they could have given that client one of those.
Yeah.
Or buttocks search. It's unreal.
Here's the thing, and the reality is, I've represented both people who don't have money. I've done pro bono cases, and I've represented people who've had a lot of money. Okay, and the people who have a lot of money, they are able to obviously afford things in terms of experts. And the state knows that those people can afford experts. I'll give you a clear example. I had a case, these synthetic steroids, okay? The synthetic drugs, the analog drugs, if you will. And they knew my client had the resources to fight the case if he wanted to. So what did the state do? The state went out and hired 3 experts. Tell me when the last time you saw the state hire 3 experts to figure out what this substance was doing. And one expert came back and said, now you have to remember, these are synthetic steroids. And so the statute says that it has to do what the actual drug does, right? So if it's a synthetic steroid, it's supposed to promote human growth and muscle growth like an actual steroid would do. So first expert comes back and says, and these are the state's 3 experts that they hired. First expert says, yep, it actually does do what it's supposed to do, so you can win this case and you can prosecute him. Second expert says, nope, doesn't do it. It doesn't promote muscle growth like an original steroid would. And the third expert says, they're both full of crap because nobody knows what the heck this substance does. And so the case got dismissed.
But only after those resources.
But only after those resources were expended.
Mm-hmm. And that happens thousands and thousands of times.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's a function of, and we do a very poor job, I think, explaining this to people. I mean, day in and day out, you know, you see people in the holdover cells, lawyers who were overworked and underpaid. Clients are trying to explain things to them, and they're like, I don't want to hear it, you know? And we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. We all have our moments when it's just too much to explain. And I think we all have that problem. How do we solve that? How do we rectify that, guys?
I think, okay, I'm sorry.
I'll say part of what's got to be done is we've got to get away from bail as a punitive system. We've got to get away from some of these onerous pretrial supervision conditions that the legislature has allowed judges to place on folks who are, I'm sorry, innocent unless proven otherwise. Because when somebody is stuck, you know, in the jail, I mean, it's a whole lot harder to defend one of those cases than when they're out. And you know, that person's in jail, their primary concern is, I want out. And I've had clients who have taken deals that I never would have recommended because that was the way they were getting out. But we've got to quit punishing folks for being defendants. We need more PR bonds. We need to get away from this one-size-fits-all bail schedule that we've got. And we need a judiciary that, you know, treats them as if they're innocent instead of treating them as like, you know, they're guilty until, you know, we prove they're guiltier.
I think what we see at the courthouse is this whole idea of, oh yeah, but we dismissed the charges later after we tested it 3 times. Or, oh yeah, we dismissed the charges later when we found out what kind of shenanigans the officers were doing. Oh, but we fixed it later when the lab came back, you know, 200 days later. But that's after someone has already gone through this mess.
It's metamorphosis. I mean, after they start their whole life over. I can't imagine that fear of, I mean, you get pulled over and you're looking in your rearview mirror, and with everything that's going on, you're thinking, my life is about to do, what do I say or do? Do I cooperate or do I not cooperate? I mean, they're in this flux because, like you said, I mean, it's, you know, at the courthouse, you know, there's a presumption of guilt there. You know, I worked for TDCJ 15 years. There, everybody was convicted of a felon. So I mean, that's how I lived. There was a presumption of guilt there. And even in that world, you still gave them the benefit of the doubt, you know, because I understood, you know, doing that many years, 6 years as a major, that a major case that some officer was pissed off about, you know, just, and the loyalty of another officer making a statement, I'd have to dig in that investigation because there's a family on the other side. Yeah, you know what, there's probably a victim to that crime, and maybe not. Maybe it was a dope case or something. But there's a family on the other side of that. And you know, there's repercussions for those major cases, just like the cases that some of the people that, you know, the clients that we have, I mean, their whole world changes by one individual who may have had their own Dear John letter that night, you know, or that text message from, you know, from a wife who just caught a cop messing around or something like that, and their whole life has changed. They're trying to get home, so they start running these, you know, I mean, they fabricate this truth, so, and we have to fight through that. And some of them don't have those resources like Mr. Kenny was talking about. You know, it's not designed to protect the poor.
Here's an idea. How about we do what the major does? They investigate first and then point the fingers. How about that? How about that, District Attorney's Office? How about you wait till wait till the blood comes back before you file that DWI? How about you, in the cases you can, test those drugs first before you decide to file that complaint?
I mean, that would inject faith into the system again, where people are held accountable. The officers who are making these decisions, they're being held accountable, not protected. I mean, we wouldn't be protected if we got, you know, I mean, I've seen it. I mean, indictments, grand jury indictments, I mean, in 30 minutes were brought to the courtroom in one case that was in. I've seen it happen. Why not do the same? I mean, that badge and that uniform that I used to wear, it didn't protect me from anything. I mean, the only thing that was underneath that badge was integrity. I knew that you know, the seal that we wore. I mean, that, you know, I seen other ones that had it, and so there was that loyalty, that bond. But integrity never. I mean, was never an issue with me.
Well, the reality is, though, I mean, the current statistics are that 97% of all people, 97, 98% of all people plead guilty. Okay, so. And they plead guilty because of the system we've talked about. So there's no way anybody's going to upset the balance of that, because politically they want to look tough on crime. And the only way you look tough on crime is if people are getting convicted and being sent to prison. We're going to open up our phone lines now, 713-807-1794. We have reached the 8:30 mark. Go ahead and give us a call. If you got a question or comment, you want to jump in on the conversation, feel free to call us. Also hit us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. Let's move on to these shootings, guys, because I mean, it just doesn't stop. Within 48 hours, we have Alton Sterling shot in Baton Rouge, and then we have Philando Castile shot in Minneapolis. Just brutal videos to watch. And I'm at a loss. I mean, I really don't know what the solution here to this thing is, because I don't even know how to explain it anymore. I really don't.
What's going on? I mean, what is going on?
Well, one thing you've got to realize is that law enforcement in general, you know, this whole motto of protect and serve, it's protect and serve who? If you look at history, back in the 60s, you had the KKK in the South lynching folks who were wanting to speak their mind. Did the cops come chasing after them? No, because, you know, half the people in the sheets were cops. And yet you had college students going and sitting at lunch counters, and they're getting arrested. You had people marching on bridges, and the police turning dogs, batons, and everything else at them. The police have always been a tool to control the masses. If you're poor, and if you're dark-skinned, the police aren't there to protect you. You know, they're there to protect the people, you know, in the common parlance, the 1%. And that's something that has never changed. And I don't see, quite frankly, in our current system, how it's ever going to change.
I mean, but if you hold the officers accountable, like I said, before they put that badge on, they're men and women. I mean, if you hold them accountable for, I mean, we've seen on the tapes, and I was going to the courthouse today and heard, you know, people, it was shocking and unbelievable. This is not new. I mean, this is,
no.
I mean, this is, I mean, you know, us people of color, you know, I have 5 children, blended family, and I have 2 boys that are half black. I mean, I can't tell my kids that this is new. I mean, I have to explain, you know, well, when you get pulled over and you don't know if your taillight's broken and it's broad daylight, no tint on your windows, there's a 4-year-old in their back seat and a woman in there, and you still draw down? I mean, and, you know, I mean, you have these different methods that you can subdue an individual. I mean, it's systematic. And how do you hold them accountable? Is by putting them on the chopping block.
Well, what's new is the videos, and having videos and live streaming on Facebook. That's what's new, and I think that's what's got people. Yeah, it has, and the graphic nature. We got a phone call coming in. Let's drop it in here. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
Let's drop it in. Hello.
Yes, hi.
Thank you. Hi. I had a couple of questions.
Sure. Can you turn your TV down, because we're getting feedback from the show?
Okay.
Thank you. You there?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead now.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was on. I had a couple of comments with regard to some of the things you said. One had to do with the FBI, that was the agents you talked to. Could I just ask you how many agents there were?
Sure. There was a dozen agents I talked to here in Houston.
So 12 agents certainly is not a small number, but it's infinitesimal as far as the scope of all that are involved with the FBI, and for them necessarily in Houston to know what the FBI in Washington saw and concluded. I just think that, you know, I'm not saying that you didn't hear that, and I'm not saying that they didn't think that to be the case. But I think that's a small sampling.
Oh, I don't disagree with you on that.
A conclusion.
But it was a consistent sampling.
But let me ask you also something else, and that is, or mention something else and ask you a question. You were making the comment that there are a lot of cases that don't get the kind of benefits that Hillary got. But isn't that true all the time? I mean, aren't there similar cases that come down on different sides all the time? I'm not saying it's right, but I mean, it does happen. And I think the FBI, I mean, we have no idea what all they saw. And to reach the conclusion they did, I'm sure he made this explanation because he knew it was going to be a controversial decision. But I served on a grand jury about a year ago, and I just know that similar cases just don't always get
the same treatment. They don't, right? They just don't.
Every case is different.
How was your experience on the grand jury?
Oh, it was great. It was fabulous.
Did you get to do the simulator, the shooting simulator?
I did, which is sort of works for the prosecution, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What was your feedback? What do you think about that? I mean, I've never been able to I've never served on the grand jury, so I've never been able to try it out. But that experience, when you hear about the shootings that have been going on, give us some insight what that officer's thinking. Like, I mean, it's spur of the moment? I mean, you want to pull the trigger because you're probably scared as heck. But is that kind of training enough? What is your feedback on that? I mean, and it has to bring you back when you hear about these stories.
Well, it does. First of all, I shot him just because I wanted to be able to do it.
Right. Yeah, right. I would too.
But I told the officer, if this had been in real life, because the kid that was running at me was a thin teenager with a club, and I told the officer that had this actually happened, I wouldn't have shot him because I felt I could have controlled it. And he brought out the comment that, well, you know, to you it wasn't frightening, but they have people on the police force that are over 70. They have some that are under 5 feet tall, which I was very surprised at. And so what appears to be not threatening to me would be threatening to them, which I never thought about, but of course that's true. But I thought the whole experience of going in there tilted just like what I just said. It makes you think of things that favor the way the prosecution might want you to.
Sure. No, I mean, and you make some good points. I mean, I'm not here to say that this is the only case. I mean, every case is different. Every case is factually different, and she's not the only one. And there are cases that they've just flat ignored, and I'm sure, have never even pursued. My point was that, people of money, fame, and power generally get treated differently in the system than those who don't. I think that was kind of what we were getting at, not necessarily, not trying to pick on her, but she's kind of the easiest one to pick on at the moment, given the news coverage.
We'd like to think that when it gets to the grand jury and members like you who have served do the right thing. And it's good to hear that, we always hear about the grand jury being held in secret and we don't know what's going on. But when you can give, as someone who served, can give some insight onto that, it makes me feel at least a little bit better that there are watch guardians of people that are serving and that are good and that have at least some idea of what's going on and doing the right thing. So thank you for your service on that and great questions.
Yeah, appreciate the call. Let's take another call here. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my question is simply, why can't we evaluate the criminal justice system, the piece that you don't contribute or represent, the sheriff, the DA, the judges themselves, these are forces that are aligned against you. The deck is stacked. The deck is stacked. The deck is stacked. So why can't you present an evaluation process about the efficacy of how they're using their resources within your briefs? When you're going and into a court, you might be able to say statistically, these cases don't pan out because there just isn't enough evidence to support this. Use the science of statistics to help you in your evaluation and of your client's innocence.
Yeah,
this is probably a whole different way of looking at things, but I'll get off.
Yeah, no, thanks for the call. I mean, we've talked about that the biggest issue, and in terms of attacking the resources of what the DA's office used, I'm not sure that we, that's a legislative.
Well, this is what I did today. Going back with the caller, this is what I did today. So I had a girl, court appointed. She was in custody. She got we got her a PR bond. She's out of custody. Young woman, 19 years old. Came back to her first court setting, and I said, "Wow, you were free." So I saw you on the first time you're in custody, got the PR bond. Now you're outside. Now let's do something. I said, "Look, I'm going to get a month reset. You have no criminal history, no nothing. In that month, I need you to go do community service hours. I need 2 letters of recommendation, and you need to get in school." And she said, "Okay, I'll do it." This court setting, and I just tell the district attorney, "You ain't got nothing. Reset the case. Yeah, we're going to trial on this. She's on bond now." And they say, haha, we'll see. So next court setting comes by. I go to the chief prosecutor in the court, and I say, "Look, this is a young African-American lady. She's about 19, 20. Look what she's done. She's done this community service hours. Here are 2 letters of recommendation. Here's her proof of enrollment in Louisiana, and she starts in August. And they would be a waste of resources and dumb to prosecute this woman."
And I've got better hair than you.
And she looked at me and said, "You want a dismissal?" I said, "She deserves a dismissal." Dismissed.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask for it, a lot of the times, we get what we ask for. You just got to get that formula with whatever court and DA you're dealing with. I'm very new to the game, but I know I've seen that you have a certain formula, and when you read the facts of the case that, hey, this is probably not going to work for this one. But yeah, I've seen a little bit more, listening from the DAs about because I'm starting to try to bring a little bit more treatment, trying to help them beyond just this period of time where they can build upon that, because they have to get faith back in the system. We have to, and we as defense attorneys have to, give that to them, by making those choices and helping them. But yeah, I've seen that a little bit better. A little more of that.
And where did it start? PR bond.
I want to go back to the first caller and what he said about, the threat and feeling the threat, and I want to kind of tie that into these shootings because, we all have, and I think the issue that I'm seeing that's consistent, you can talk about the race wars and everything else, but the consistent theme that I'm seeing is that these guys are they have a happy trigger finger. And, it's like, it's almost as like they are preconditioned to view any movement or anything as a threat. That caller said, if this is out in the street, I feel like I could contain the situation.
No, I can agree with you just a little bit, but I think the simple factor is that the pigment of his skin. There's a lot of profiling going on.
Absolutely, and I think the statistics bear out. But what I'm saying is that I feel like that they automatically, there's just a sense that, the pigment of the skin is a trigger that, I feel threatened, and that's what's going
Well,
to.
I think part of what's going on is we've had the increased militarization of the police.
Right.
You've got government programs in which surplus military equipment is given or sold to local police departments. You've got police departments in which you've got guys that you can't tell whether they're an officer or they're a soldier. There are a couple of guys at the sheriff's office I see walking around wearing, fatigues, like we're in a war zone or something, walking around the courthouse. The problem when you start to militarize the police, it becomes an us against them. And when it's us against them, It's like them is the enemy. And you don't give them the same benefit of the doubt that you might give somebody else. And we've gotten more and more, to that scenario. It's us against them, and we're going to do what we're going to do. And we're going to take our military equipment and we're going to do it.
In these two cases, both, well, at least in Baton Rouge, the guy was alleged to have a weapon. Now, whether he did or not, I don't think there's anything conclusive. There's, at a point, I guess in the video, you see him reach in his pocket, but there's been no conclusive proof that he had a weapon. At least not that I've seen. If you guys have seen something else.
I thought I heard he had a weapon.
Well, that's what everybody's saying, but I haven't seen anything that said conclusive proof.
We haven't seen the surveillance film from the store. We haven't seen, or we haven't heard the 911 call that
right.
to have.
But the case of Minnesota, he did have a gun. He was lawfully carrying it as a concealed handgun, and he told the cop that. He told the cop as much. And I feel like in this case, you have two black men who it was either alleged they had a gun or he admitted to having a gun, and it's like that's when the automatic threat went on in these cops' minds, and that was their reaction.
So much for the fiction that having concealed carry is going to make everybody safer.
Yeah, well, and look, I mean, I think it makes everybody safer if you're not black.
And if you look
That's
at
the reality.
If you look at the video, it is obvious he is in his last breaths of his life, and he's still terrified of the man. He's still screaming profanities with this. And this woman is talking to him. And then after she's in the vehicle, you can hear, and I've took this video apart because I used to do it for a living, looking at these videos, major use of force and all those, and the radio traffic has been minimized. So, you can tell, very little radio traffic.
But he knows he screwed up.
Yeah, you can hear him
You
scream.
can hear it.
Yeah, you can hear him screaming, but yet, the interim, police chief, he's still trying to protect him. I get it, but he's still a man first.
Yeah.
He's not that's when you have to take that loyalty and say, listen, loyalty is going to stick with this integrity.
And why was the girlfriend forced to get out of the car, walk backwards, get on her knees, be handcuffed, and put in a car?
Yeah.
What was her crime? Videotaping a cop murdering her boyfriend?
She had the wherewithal to think of throwing it looked like she threw her purse over the lens, and then that's when you could hear the baby get next to the phone.
She remained remarkably calm.
Yes.
The whole thing.
Oh, I hope he's not dying there. Kind of looks like he's dying.
Well,
I hope he's not.
in those situations,
I was amazed by that.
Amazed, blows my mind. And I at first I was thinking, is this really happening, or is this like a reenactment?
No, in those situations, I've seen, horrible riots, and when the camera's on, you're trying to capture these moments, and you are still. And as soon as that turns off, of course, you start falling apart, and you can clearly hear that. But again, where's we need to get these guys. We need to get this information out and put out, and it's just not there.
And we just saw is it the 3 or the 4, or at least 3 of them, of the officers involved in the death of Freddie Gray out in Chicago getting acquitted.
And that's what I was going to talk about when Trinidad was saying about, the officers being held accountable. That doesn't happen. Police officers, are not held accountable in the courtroom. It's almost the same bias that we find. You ask the jurors, it's like, are you going to sit there and take the word of this police officer over the word of somebody else? And they'll all say, no, they won't. But they do. And here, they're giving extreme deference to the testimony of the police officer when the police officer is the defendant. That part of it never changes. And you've got to question, the way the cases were tried. But you can't get a break.
You think out in Louisiana, if anybody knows this, who's going to do the follow-up investigation? Their own team, like in-house? Because I think out in Minnesota
DOJ.
they ship it out.
It's DOJ.
They handed it over.
Yeah.
It's DOJ Civil Rights is the lead, and FBI is assisting.
Well, it worked. The system worked for Hillary. Let's see if it'll work for the two dead black men. It's horrible. America, what's wrong with you?
And I'm not as clear on the facts of what happened in Baton Rouge, other than the 911 call about, a person outside the convenience store allegedly carrying a gun. But the Minnesota case, I mean, that just straight up seems like murder to me.
I mean, he tells the officer, I have a permit to carry it. I'm carrying a gun.
The officer instructs him to get his license.
Yeah, and then you hear in that video, you shot him. Well, he was going. I told him not to get the gun. It's like, no, you told him to get his license and his registration. And all of this,
like,
and all of this, and he's
make
dead.
a move.
And he's dead over a cracked tail lamp.
Yeah. Cracked tail lamp. I mean, I'm kind of at a loss. I don't know what more we can do.
But I mean, let's go back to Baton Rouge, Alton.
I just don't.
I mean, they have a 911 call that says you have an individual who's possibly armed, and you're going to get so close as to wrestle with him?
Yeah.
I mean, you need to go and stand back. I'm sure you could look at that protocol over there. You arrive at a situation, contain it, but you go and wrestle with somebody in that close, in that tight of a, area?
And you've got him down on the ground, and he's shot in both the chest and the back.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I saw a statistic today. The number of shootings of minorities have gone up since Ferguson. So it's not going. What do you do? What do you do?
I don't know. I was thinking that on the way up, listening to NPR. We drive into downtown, and you go underneath the bridge by the 59 by the Astros Stadium, and you have all those people living right underneath the bridge, right underneath 59, just living right next to the Astros Stadium. There's 100 of them, and you think, and you judge, and most of us drive right by. We kind of look and we say, well, that sucks, and we go on and just try to go on about our day. But there's a real sense of those are the guys that are getting shot. Yeah. They're dying. They're literally getting killed on the street by our government.
Well, I think it's not even them. It's teenagers. Mm-hmm. It's fathers. We're not even talking about the so-called forgotten folks. I mean, these are people who are raising their families, or who are kids themselves in school. They're getting their lives snuffed out.
I don't know what the answer is. Take away, maybe you need super special training to carry a gun. I don't know. For law enforcement. I don't know. I think.
Listen, a lot of people, with TDCJ, when I was there, you'd bring this facility into a rural area, and they've never dealt with the diversity of people that are from the hood. That are from the ghetto, from the barrios. They never dealt with that. They don't know the hustle, and then so they become institutionalized with them, but they need further education, because I remember it just being a big mental institution. I don't remember anything very good coming out of the penitentiary. The people that worked in there, a lot of them were great people, but I don't remember any rehabilitation really going on. I remember hose squads, people fighting, riots, serious situations. So, but we never trained our staff anymore. We had a 1 year, every year you had an in-service for 40 weeks, and we talked about war stories inside of, these penitentiaries. So education, of course, would be, but not just, education at the top level too, because they got to learn how to deal with the younger officers that are coming in, these people that aren't, they don't understand diversity.
But here's the issue. We're again, we talk about the consequent holding the police officers responsible. We're all criminal defense lawyers on this, and so this is a weird topic, because, at the same time we're talking about people who are being pulled over for allegedly committing an offense, who are then ending up dead. But then you've got the police officers who are then charged, and they're the defendant. And is it? You talk about Freddie Gray. How do you prove, and this goes again, how do you prove intent?
Tough. And videos, and then we let the jury decide.
But does it come down to, and this loops back to our first topic, what did they say about Hillary? They couldn't prove intent. They certainly could prove she was negligent. These guys are clearly grossly negligent in the way they're acting, okay? But how do you prove that he intended to kill him, which is what you need for murder?
That's a tough question.
And it can happen like that.
Right.
I don't know, man.
See your license and
It
registration.
happens. It happens in this city multiple times a week. Someone gets killed. You know, is this someone that Joe Bob intended to kill him? You know, had they been drinking? Was there an argument? Was there something else? And I think this whole issue about can we prove intent has a lot to do with who the person, who pulled the trigger is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure, but the issue is if these guys can articulate that they felt a threat and a jury believes them.
If it's reasonable.
The system worked.
Oh,
It's
man.
just tough. I mean, that's the thing. You've got to look at this from, it's hard.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's hard.
I mean, at times, we're defending them, just to mitigate their punishment. I mean, if they have them locked down, that's what we're trying to do, is protect those rights because they're connected to ours.
Yeah, but it's just like when you think about it, your first visceral reaction is, damn it, that's murder. But then you stop and think about it, and you put your lawyer hat on, and you start walking through the elements, and you're like,
no.
How do they prove intent?
It's tough.
How do they prove that these guys, had the what's the term from law school? Malice aforethought to go out and kill somebody.
Going back what Paul said, for example, we were doing this. I was working on this capital murder, and the guy had this nickname of, I'm going to change it, but it was something equivalent to, like, Killer MC or something like that. That's how. And they pulled that Facebook picture up, and when he was like, I didn't do it. Yeah, and they had his name up.
That is all the time we have for tonight.
We didn't even get to the last one, man.
We
We're
got
ready
so
for that
wrapped
one.
up. I know. We may have to carry it over for next week. But we thank you guys. Paul Kennedy,
Thank you.
Trinidad Zamora, thank you for coming back on. We appreciate it. Julio Vela, we'll be back next week, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Reasonable Doubt. Good night.
Man, your hair, man. That hair is legit. That hair is-